Welcome to Fintech Daydreaming, the podcast that dives into the world of banking technologies and the ever-changing landscape of fintech companies. We bring you real-life examples from global and local thought leaders, as well as experts working within the financial industry, and seek out the best stories from the front lines of financial services innovation, where dreams of industry pioneers meet reality. Hosted by Paul Krogdahl and Ville Sontu. This is Fintech Daydreaming.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Fintech Daydreaming. This is the second episode of season 9, and I cannot believe that it's already season 9 of our podcast. This is the first episode where we actually this season are going to have a real guest with us. The previous one was the Fintech News episode, as you might have noticed a couple of weeks ago. But now we're going to have the first real guest of 2024, and I'm really looking forward to it. My name is Ville Sontu. I will be your host for today's episode. But as always, I'm joined by my co-pilot, co-host, and good friend, Paul Krugdahl. So, Paul, how has 24 treated you so far?
So far, good. I'm feeling relieved to be having a dry January. I think the festive season was full of liquid joy, and whilst I enjoyed it immensely and had an awful lot of good fun with friends and family and everything else, my liver is right now saying thank you, Paul, for giving me a break. And I will see how long I can keep this break going. I mean, normally it's dry January. Let's see if we can have dry 2024. That would be interesting, right?
Yeah, I think all of us are trying to kind of be on our best behavior in January usually, but I like the idea of prolonging it a little bit longer as well. So continuing the detox January into a detox 24 maybe.
Yep.
So let's see how it goes. But it's all good and fun. And again, our bodies are thanking us for these good decisions. But another good decision was for us was actually to invite our guest today to talk about a very relevant topic. So it's now the beginning of 2024, and we are really in the season where a lot of people are finding new opportunities. They're changing jobs. You can see that on LinkedIn today. You can see that just today I saw at least a dozen different contacts that I had on LinkedIn starting in new roles, going for new opportunities. And this relates to employee retention, employee satisfaction, when you're going forward in your career, why are you leaving your current employer? And on this theme, I've really feel like this is a perfect time to have the guest that we have today, who is Joey Coleman. So Joey, how are you today?
Villa, I'm doing great. Thank you so much to you and Paul for inviting me on the show. 2024 is off to a great start because I get to hang out with amazing folks like you two and your listeners. So feeling really good about where things are going this year.
Yeah, it's just a fair warning. I mean, we are fintech nerds, so it's going to go quite fintech nerdy stuff as we usually do, but I hope you enjoy it as much as we do.
I'll do my best to hang on. I am neither a fintech expert nor somebody who is steeped in a clear understanding of all the nuance of fintech, but I'll do my best to play one on TV today.
Perfect point. And again, Joey, the reason we felt that it's really good to talk to you right now, especially, is because you wrote a book called "Never Lose an Employee Again," and before that, you wrote a book called "Never Lose a Customer Again." And we're going to go into those topics again. But before we go deeper, why don't you give us a bit of an introduction for our listeners? So, who are you? Where are you coming from? And where are you going?
So my name is Joey Coleman, and for the last 20 years, I have helped teach organizations how to keep their customers and how to keep their employees. The way I do that is I'm a keynote speaker, I'm a consultant, I'm an author, and I try to help organizations realize that by being more remarkable, they create the kind of audiences that they hope to have, whether those are audiences of customers or clients or audiences of employees. The more we kind of embrace what's unique about us, what's remarkable about us, and lean into creating those personal and emotional connections, the more we will attract the type of opportunities and relationships and possibilities that will really allow us to succeed and flourish.
Yeah, I mean, again, those relationships to both directions are very important, and we will come to the element of how does that build trust and how does it relate to financial services specifically. But I did give you a fair warning. We are a fintech podcast and we are very nerdy. And one of the traditions that we have in the podcast is that we always ask our guests to do a joke that is hopefully fintech related. So Joey, did you have a joke for our audience today?
Well, I don't know if it full on qualifies as a joke, but I'll make people laugh by the way I deliver it. At least I hope. So while, as I said earlier, I don't have a lot of experience in the fintech space, I did run an ad agency for many years. And during that time, I worked with a lot of coders and developers, building websites, building apps, building online tools. So realizing that a lot of fintech has to do with programming, I guess I'll reference a meme that I'm familiar with, right? And this is He-Man, the character from the 80s. And it's this idea that we have He-Man saying, and remember, friends, 6 hours of debugging can save you 5 minutes of reading documentation until the next one, right? And so I think that's, my take on all too often. We're very excited to let's just code, let's debug instead of pumping the brakes a little bit and saying, hey, let's maybe think about the documentation and see if someone already addressed this for us.
I was really hoping there for a reference to, by the power of Grayskull, but, fine.
Yes, exactly. That's the second version of the joke, Paul. I like
Joey, you really found our audience. 80s He-Man. Things correlate, especially the
trying to do my best. I'm a child of the 80s as well. So
yeah. I think I still have the plastic doll somewhere. But anyway,
nice.
let's leave that story for another day, perhaps. Good. But let's get on to the topic of today and talking about both customer retention and employee retention. And let's start by actually building the bridge between those two things a little bit. So again, like we said, you have written 2 books, one on customer retention, one on employee retention. Could you talk a little bit about what was your path towards framing your work this way in terms of retention on both sides of the equation?
Sure. So I mentioned earlier that I had an ad agency, and of course, running an ad agency for about 15 years, my job was to help drive as much attention to my clients' product and service offerings as possible. We would do everything from online ads to billboards to direct mail campaigns to, helping their salespeople just do a better job of telling their story. And what I realized in fairly short order is we were really good at driving attention, and we were really good at getting prospects to convert and become customers. But when I would go back to those clients 3 months later, 6 months later, a year later, they hadn't grown the way they should have. And the reason I say should have is the new customers that we were helping them to get weren't staying. And when I dove into the numbers, I realized that none of the customers they had, not just the ones that were coming in through our campaigns, were staying. And the reason for that is the great majority of customers, especially new customers, will decide to stop doing business with you before the 100-day anniversary. And when I realized this, guys, that a significant percentage, depending on your industry, 20 to 70% of new customers are going to leave before the 100-day anniversary, I realized that there was an opportunity to think differently about retention. And so what we did is we started focusing on those first 100 days and what we could do in the first 100 days to create such a remarkable experience that customers would want to keep coming back for more. And when we did that, we dramatically improved the retention. And because I know we've got a lot of nerds listening in, myself included, right? I like to look to the numbers, and the numbers are very clear. The research has proven time and time again that if you can get 5%, just 5% of your customers who are going to leave to actually stay, it will increase your profits 25 to 100%. Now, this research has been supported by Harvard Business School, Stanford Business School, Bain and Company. Research around the world has shown that if we just keep the people that have already come in the door inside the building, instead of having them run out the back door as quickly as we bring them in the front, it has a dramatic impact on our bottom line. And so that's really what led me to get interested in customer retention and to start focusing more on how we could think differently about the way we're creating experiences to build in the kind of customer retention that would keep our customers long term.
I've actually got an interesting question on that, because I mean, I've spent most of my career working in consulting. So it's been very customer centric. It's been about delivering value to customers and helping them to drive their business. And there's always a notion or a belief, I would say, that it's easier to drive new value from existing customers than to get new customers. But what you're saying is, if you don't manage to hook your customers within the first 100 days, it's going to be just as hard to drive new value from existing customers as it is to get new customers?
I would say yes, Paul, that's definitely the case. But what's interesting is your analysis or your belief that, getting business from existing customers and driving new value with existing customers is better than trying to find it with new customers is totally true. And the research proves that as well. When we look at the typical sales process across all industries, the average sales conversation converts somewhere between 5 and 10% of the time, when we factor in all sales mediums, all sales channels, all products, all services. If we're selling to someone who's already a customer, that rate skyrockets to 60 to 65%. So you're spot on that it's much easier to sell to somebody who's already a customer. The problem is we've got to make sure that they stay a customer long enough for us to sell them the next thing. And this is where I think a lot of businesses, and respectfully, even fintech businesses, have a tendency to try to do too much too quickly. They get you to buy one product or sign up for one service. And then before you've even had the chance to experience the benefits of that product or service, they're trying to upsell you to the next offering. And that's where I think lots of times our desire to continue to deepen the relationship monetarily, buy more of our product, buy more of our service, runs counterintuitive to that trust you mentioned earlier, Villa, of how do we first establish the trust and the confidence and the consistency of the relationship before we ask someone to invest even more of their effort.
It sort of aligns to that notion that a lot of consulting organizations have got, that you get your foot in the door and you land and expand as quickly as possible. What you're saying is, get your foot in the door, land, deliver, prove yourself, and then look to expand rather than trying to do it all too fast.
Exactly. And what's interesting is lots of times when we think of that analogy of getting the foot in the door, we think of someone trying to slam the door and we get our foot in before they slam it. It's problematic to me, the analogy to start with. Like we should be looking at what is the invitation to come in and sit down and have a cup of tea, come in and be part of our organization, come in and learn our culture, learn our way of doing business, and then start to expand on your own ideas, as opposed to what is often, and forgive me, gentlemen, being the American on the call, the more Amerocentric of, well, let's just jam our foot in there as hard as we can, and then let's get another foot on top of that one, and then maybe 3 more, and now we're here and it's ours. No, This is not a recipe for long-term success.
Do you think this is a symptom of venture capital? Because, again, venture capital usually incentivized to actually get a lot of customers, maybe not profitable customers in the beginning, but then you're relying on the upsell. Do you think that those things are connected?
I absolutely think they're connected. And I think venture capitalism and venture capital and private equity and those type of things can be good, but more often than not, they're not good. And here's why. And this is not a criticism to anybody who's listening in who's in the VC or PE world. But the challenge often is we're trying to experience success so quickly that we are going to have to make choices that are not in our interest long term. I'm reminded of an event I was at years ago. Tony Robbins was speaking. And Tony Robbins said, if I were to offer you $1 billion, if you could come in tomorrow having lost 50 pounds, could you do it? And most people in the audience were like, oh, I'd love the $1 billion, but no, it's impossible to do. And I said, yeah, I could do it.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's kind of looking. And I said, you'd have to chop off both your legs, but you could lose 50 pounds in a day and make $1 billion. This is what I think VC firms often think about. They often think about, are we chopping off the legs of any type of a long-term relationship by achieving our goal of let's get the money tomorrow? But we're causing huge consequence for any hope of being able to have a long-term relationship in the future based on the behavior we're exercising today.
But then also at the same time, I mean, the whole notion of VC, sorry, Villa, the whole notion of VCs, if you look at their motivations, it is very often about grow fast and an IPO to get out and get your money back. So they are going to want to chop the legs because they're not in it for the long-term relationship. They're in it for the, how can I make my money back as fast as possible? Because that's what I'm investing in.
And this is often, I think, Paul, where we have a challenge between founder mentality and VC mentality. Many founders, not all, but many founders start their business with the goal of impacting the world, making a change, righting a wrong, fixing something that's broken. They would love to have an exit. They would love to have an IPO, which I always think is fascinating. Go talk to people whose businesses have gone through an IPO and ask them if an IPO is really that exciting. Most will tell you it's not. But they have this vision of, well, this is my path to get where I want. And the problem is, if we look at the success rate of most VCs, we see that if they're succeeding 1 out of every 10 times, they're an industry leader. I don't know about you, but every founder I've ever met thinks that they're going to be the 1 out of 10. When the reality is they're most likely, statistically, going to be the 9 out of 10 that doesn't succeed. And so I think, I'm not anti-VC. What I am is anti-thinking that the short-term gratification is going to be enough to fulfill you or sustain you. It's not. Even if you do have the big exit, and I know many, many leaders and many entrepreneurs who have had amazing exits. And what I've found is that within 6 months, they're back in the game again. Not because they have a better idea or something else they want to do, but because the exit didn't create the kind of fulfillment that they hoped it was going to create. And I think that gets us into a more philosophical conversation of, what are your definitions of success? What does it take to make you happy? When will you feel like you're enough?
So building on this analogy of chopping off your legs for $1 billion in a VC environment, your first book, the How to Never Lose a Customer, without spoiling the book completely, I mean, in this scenario, what would be your advice to actually using customer experience for a better result, maybe not losing your legs in this situation?
Well, I think the overarching analogy, and in the book, Never Lose a Customer Again, I outline 8 phases of the customer journey. And most businesses, when they first get exposed to these 8 phases, realize they're paying attention to about 3 of them, maybe 4, not all 8. And the overarching principle of all 8 phases is you need to acknowledge where the customer is in the relationship and hold their hand to get them to the next phase in the relationship. All too often, we sell the customer, and the first thing we start thinking about, to Paul's point earlier, is, well, how can we sell them more? Or how can we get them to bring all of their friends to come and buy from us as well? I understand the desire to want to do this. But if we just think of our own buying habits, if I were to ask Villa or Paul, when you buy a new product, do you immediately go on social media and start raving about how amazing it is before you've used it? Do you immediately go somewhere and think, oh, quickly, let me get everybody I know to come here and spend money here too, before you've had a chance to experience it? No, this is not how humans work. We take ownership and pride over our social capital at a higher degree than to be willing to make referrals and to sell other people on a new product or a service that we haven't personally experienced or had a consistent experience with. This is the fundamental challenge that I think most businesses face. They want a brand new customer to become a raving fan advocate the first day.
Mm.
This is a fundamental flaw. It's going to take some time. And if we're constantly being driven by how quickly and how much, as opposed to how deep and how long, we miss that opportunity to build a long-term relationship.
I know we want to move into what I think is more interesting, which is the how not to lose your employees. But I've got one last question on that before we sort of move on. And I'm thinking most, at least, publicly listed companies are quarterly driven, which means that the minute you sell something, you're looking at how do I expand that within this quarter, because I need to deliver my results in this quarter. Do you think that the quarterly driven approach by most organizations are actually counterproductive in their ability to maintain their customers?
Only 100%, Paul. Only 100%. Yeah, exactly. Yes, I think this is a fundamental problem. This drive for what about this quarter? What are the next results? And this insatiable quest to do more next quarter than we did this quarter, to have more employees, more clients, more revenue, more sales, a bigger footprint on the planet. This more mentality runs counterintuitive to sustainability. What I like to look at is the success of many companies in Japan at using a 500-year business plan. Now, most people don't realize in Japan, a business plan, as a general rule, is for 500 years. Now, when we start thinking in terms of 5 centuries, what I did this quarter, what I did this year, what I did this decade doesn't really matter as much as am I laying the foundation for the next century and the century after that. I think when we just shift our thinking to allow for a long-term consideration, we are in a better position. This came up recently with my wife and I. We're considering building a house. And I have visions of what I would like the house to look like. She has visions of what she would like the house to look like. And one of the things we have both agreed upon is we want to have as few stairs in the house as possible. We want the house to be as much as possible on one level. Now, some people thinking of that might say, well, Joey, come on, stairs are a great way to get exercise. And they are. But we both have parents that are in their late 70s. And we know plenty of people that are in their 80s and their 90s. And as I look at hopefully living in this house, if I'm going to build a house, I want to live in it for a while. If I think about building a house that I'm going to live in for the next 30 or 40 years, I want to make sure that I can access the entire house. So it would be wise for me to build a single floor home instead of a home with multiple levels, just for my own vision. Now, do I hope to be healthy? Yes. Do I hope to be able to still walk up the stairs without any problem at age 100? Yes. But I know enough about aging and science to know that the statistical likelihood of that being as easy at 100 as it is at age 50 is very, very different. So how are we thinking in decades or centuries instead of in quarters is definitely something I try to do in my own life as well.
I don't want to jinx this at all, but sorry, Villa. You do know, Joey, right, that building a house statistically is a large cause of divorce.
I do. Yes, I know that this is not necessarily a wise choice on my part, but I'm confident that the relationship can withstand it. And that's why I said we're considering. We haven't made the decision. We are going through a process to decide if this is even a course of action that we want to take.
Can I suggest that your next book is How to Never Lose a Spouse Again?
I appreciate the suggestion, Paul. People have asked me, Joey, can we apply the principles in your book to our dating relationships and our personal relationships? And the answer, with all honesty, is 100% yes, because there is a parallel to our personal, intimate relationships with our business relationships. And here's the parallel. Normally, when we're in a sales process, We're whining and dining the prospect. We're courting them. We're putting our best foot forward. We're trying to present all the glorious opportunities that will be available to them if they're in relationship with us. And the relationship continues, more dates, more special dinners, maybe going to unique events together. Ironically enough, this is the same thing we do with prospects, right? We do this in our dating lives. And then the person says, yes, I'm all in. I want to be in relationship with you. And so what does the typical organization do? Well, we have a huge wedding reception, kickoff call, where we get everybody together to celebrate this new relationship. And then we say, honey, let me take your hand, and we walk them to the honeymoon suite, and we throw open the door and we say, I'd like you to meet Bob. Bob is our junior account manager. He's going to take care of this relationship going forward. I need to go find someone else to date. This is how most organizations work. The salesperson is not responsible for the relationship long-term. They hand off to someone who wasn't on any of the dates, wasn't part of any of the hopes, the dreams, the fears, the candlelit dinners, the wonderful events. And we're shocked when that person says, wait a second, this isn't the relationship I signed up for. And we're shocked when that person says, I actually don't want to be part of this anymore. And we're shocked when the person says, I feel like you don't care about me. You treat me as a number. These things happen because of the way our businesses are structured. And if we think instead about how can we continue to deepen a personal and emotional connection with our customers over time, how can we build the relationship to be more multifaceted? That's what leads to long-term success.
I never thought that we would take this way around to the next part of the conversation, which was the to move from customer experience to employee experience. But I love this segue. So we have built a foundation now on basically customer retention and, well, marriage retention in a way, and then moving on to the employee, keeping your employees part of the conversation. So like we mentioned a couple of times already, your second book was really about how to never lose an employee again. So building on this, what we just went through, how does it all connect to employee relationships in the same way as perhaps it connects to relationships?
So what's interesting, Villa, is humans are humans, whether they are prospects, whether they are customers, whether they are prospective candidates for a position, or whether they are employees. Humans are humans. And what we know about humans and what has been proven throughout millennia, not only in terms of research, but our anecdotal experience as humans, is that humans like to be in relationship with people who they like, who they trust, and who they feel like and trust them, right? There needs to be reciprocity. For all too long, many businesses have operated from a place of, well, if it doesn't work out with this employee, I'll just go get a new one. And that mindset has created the huge number of employees who have quit, especially in the last 4 or 5 years. We think about the Great Resignation. We think about quiet quitting. The research, I haven't seen any research for 2024 yet. We're barely 2 weeks into the year. But what I have seen is as we look to 2023, it is estimated that globally, these numbers show up in Europe, they show up in Africa, they show up in Asia, they show up in the Americas, that globally, approximately 50% of people, 50% of employees were considering a job change. We're considering switching to a new company. We're switching to a new career. 50%. This is unprecedented in human history. On top of that, coming out of COVID, we see that pre-COVID, let's say, 30 years ago, as a general rule, you worked for an employer that was located within 20 kilometers of your home. Most likely, you either went to an office or your boss or whoever it is you work for was pretty close to your home. Maybe if you had a long commute, you commuted for an hour, right? But most people, it was pretty close to home. Now, if you work for an employer who is headquartered within 20 or 30 kilometers of your house, it tells me a couple of things about your role or the type of employee you are. Either you work in an industry that is very hands-on. Maybe you work for a chiropractor's office, or you actually work on an assembly line where you're actually doing something physically with your hands. But most knowledge workers today don't fall into that category. Or it tells me that you actually aren't that valuable of an employee. And forgive that stark assessment, but the possibilities to work for other employers, to get new skill sets that are available today that weren't even available 5 years ago, is unprecedented. You know, the biggest threat that my clients in North America have right now is their top employees being poached by non-US companies. Non-US companies that are coming in saying, you already are in the United States, you're on a US time zone, we're trying to expand our market share there, you speak American fluently, American as its own language, right? And we'd like to pay you what you're making or more. We'll give you better healthcare benefits because pretty much everywhere on the planet has better healthcare than in the United States. We're going to do all kinds of perks, all kinds of opportunities. Oh, and by the way, we're going to fly you to headquarters in Paris, in Stockholm, you know, in Nice, wherever it may be, once a year for about a week to come to our annual meeting. Otherwise, you can work from your home and keep your own schedule. And as long as the work is getting done, we're happy. Are you interested in our job offer? And most employees are. So this is the challenge we face, right? The landscape has changed dramatically to keep our employees. And so as employers, we need to shift our mindset from, well, I'll just find another one, to if I've invited you in and I've made a job offer and you've accepted the job offer and you're part of the team, my goal should be to keep you part of the team and to deepen that personal and emotional relationship.
And then applying these principles that we have established, then how do you do that? Because I mean, I guess my first intuition based on this, that if you don't go to the office, or if you do go to the office, you have to go to the office, being in proximity of the office, you're not that important. But then on the other hand, doesn't that also keep, you know, employees committed because they are able to meet people, be physically present in the office, push back on a little bit on that remote aspect?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Villa. No, let's be honest. The social and the personal implications on working remotely, we've only begun to scratch the surface of, right? The big challenge I see, let's bring it back to marriage and dating, right? The big challenge I see is historically, you met your spouse, your partner, in one of three places: school, a place of worship, or work. Statistically, those were the three places that most people met their significant other, their spouse. Well, when we look at school, we have less people going to college today than used to. So when we get to that marrying age, we have less people going and doing it. When we look at places of worship, pretty much every religion on the planet is seeing fewer young people join the religion than were historically. And when we look at places of work, we have more and more people working remotely from their living room or from their home office than going to an office where, to your point, they might meet coworkers and create some bond and relationship. So we do have, I think, some significant challenges to figure out as it relates to how do we socialize with other humans when we're working remotely. That being said, if we look at employee experience, all the research, all the data shows that employees prefer working from home than working in an office. Now, there are notable exceptions. You'll have an employee say, but I miss the office. I like the office. No, I get that. But statistically, those people are in a minority. The majority of employees would be much happier spending the majority of their time working from home. Now, do I think there's a blend? Yes. I'm a big proponent of hybrid work. I don't like the idea of never being in front of your colleagues, but I also don't like the idea of, well, you have to be in front of your colleagues 5 days a week for this to be successful. I think there's a blend in the middle, and I think it's up to every organization, and more specifically, every team within an organization, to decide what the proper blend is for their team. Developers, with all due respect, usually not big extroverted people types, right? They're happy sitting in the basement coding away, not interacting with other humans. But if we talk about salespeople, and we say, oh, we want you to just work from home and never have interactions with anyone, that's a much more difficult challenge. They're hardwired to be around people, to feel that extroverted energy and to feed off that extroverted energy. That's why I say it almost requires a department by department assessment of how often people should be under the same roof versus being able to work from wherever they feel most productive or most comfortable.
But I think there's an underlying fundamental element here, and potentially you highlighted it before, right? Which is the whole notion of a company having an element of I won't say ownership, but dedication to their employees has disappeared. I mean, we used to have this notion of job for life. You know, I worked 26 years in IBM. When I joined IBM, most people there had this notion of, I joined IBM out of college and I've stayed until I retire. That doesn't exist anymore. We've got the growth of the gig economy. We've got people believe they're going to have to change jobs every 3 years. But to most of them, you know, the organization as well see their employees as just another number on a spreadsheet. That there is no belief that they have to look after you either. So I can sort of, it's almost a dichotomy, right? We're saying how to never lose an employee again, but you're treating them as throwaway assets anyway, right?
Paul, exactly. Well, let's look at a couple of things. Number one, we have the departments that are responsible for our employees are called human resources.
Yeah.
We think of them as a resource, not a human. Many departments have spent way too much time focused on the resource and not enough time focused on the human. You mentioned IBM, and we can see this with a number of large corporations. Many of the leaders I talk to today say, well, these kids today, they're just not loyal. And I'm like, why aren't they loyal? Well, because they leave. Why do you think they leave? Well, because they just don't care. No. Make no mistake about it. They leave because they watch their parents attempt to be loyal to employers, come in out of college and expect to work at IBM until retirement, and then get laid off at age 48 or 52, short of retirement. They watched pensions get raided, pensions that were supposed to be funded not being properly funded, and now there's no retirement. They watched organizations say, well, instead of paying you $100,000, we're going to hire 3 kids fresh out of college at $34,000 a piece, and we'll get 3 for the price of 1. Make no mistake about it. This bed was made by the employers. And now the employers are starting to feel some of the consequence of their choices. And they're frustrated. And I understand they're frustrated, but you caused the problem, friends. Yeah. But here's the good news. You can fix the problem just as quickly as you caused it. You can become an employer of choice by treating your people well. You can become an employer that everyone wants to work for if working for you feels like I'm going to be treated like a human being, feels like there's going to be some loyalty, there's some appreciation. There's a case study that I have in the book from a tech company called 7 Rooms. 7 Rooms makes a software solution for hotels to manage their reservations. And they have a program called Fresh Start. Here's how it works. Let's say, Villa, that I'm working at 7 Rooms, you're applying for a job, and I say to you, Villa, we'd like to extend you the job offer. And you say, oh, fantastic, I accept your job offer. I say, great, we're so excited to have you. When would you like to start? And you say, I'd like to start on March 1st. We say, great, we'll see you on March 15th. You say, wait a second. I said I wanted to start on March 1st. Oh, I heard you, Villa, and we're going to start paying you on March 1st. Your health insurance benefits will start on March 1st. Your contributions to the 401k or your retirement fund will start on March 1st. But we want you to take those first 2 weeks and go on vacation. Go do something that you'd love to do. There's something probably that you've been meaning to do for a long time. Go and do that thing so that you have a fresh start when you show up on the 15th. Now, here's the only thing we ask, Villa. When you come in on the 15th and you meet the team for the first time, we're going to ask for you to talk for 4 or 5 minutes about what you did during your fresh start. Tell us the story of you went and spent time with family. You went on a ski vacation. You went hiking in the Alps. You went to the beach in the Caribbean. Whatever you did, we just want you to tell us so that we learn a little bit more about what excites you and what makes you you.
I love
Now,
that.
That shows, right? That shows an investment. Before I've gotten any value from you, I'm investing into you as an employer. Here's the last thing I'll say on that case study. In the year prior to initiating the Fresh Start, with the roles that they had open, they received 12,000 applicants for the various positions they had open. After starting the Fresh Start program, that number went to over 24,000, a 94% increase in applicants based purely on we're going to treat you as a valued member of the team before you even start.
Now, every employer listening to this podcast now, please take that advice. I love that. So again, this I would comment. You kind of brought me into the example, so I already kind of feel warm inside. But just by thinking about that kind of gift to me as a new employee, because again, coming into a new situation, sometimes you're just jumping from one job to another. You never get a chance to actually reflect or deflate a little bit before you go to the next thing, and doing it this way is just a fantastic idea. So
It
I
actually
hope
made
more
me
people
think,
do that in the future.
it made me think a little bit there, Villa, with the process here in Finland, where when you start a new job with a new company, you have to earn your first year worth of annual leave. So you actually start with zero. And it's not until, towards the end of your first year of working that you've got any stored up vacation days anyway. So it's a complete opposite.
It
Yeah,
really is,
exactly.
Paul. And there are many companies in the United States that are the same way. One of my younger siblings just started working at a company, and he started working there on December 1st. Well, it came to Christmas time and the holidays, and I'm one of a large family. I'm one of 7 children, and many of us were home with our spouses and our children, and so the nieces and nephews and everybody's around. And this brother needs to go into work because, to your point, he hasn't earned the vacation. And I'm thinking, if I'm his boss, no one is working on December 26th. No one wants to be at work. No one wants to go to work. No one wants to leave their house and go do things. Like maybe we need someone at the grocery stores and maybe at the gas stations and things like that. But the type of business he's in, no one was going to be buying or going to their office.
But there you actually...
The amount of... Sorry, I was just going to say the amount of goodwill that his boss would have engendered if he would have said, you know what, I know you haven't earned up the vacation yet, but we're just going to shut down the office. That's what I do with my team. I have a brand new employee who started working for me last year. And as we were coming up in October, I said, oh, we should talk about the Christmas holidays and the holidays at the end of the year and New Year's and all those things. And I watched her face and she got a little nervous, like, oh, how's this going to lie? And I said, we'll be shutting down the office on December 20th and reopening on January 2nd. During that time, you will be paid, but you will not come to work. You will not be expected to email. In fact, I will be upset if I see you sending emails or accessing email. This is time for you to enjoy with your family, to rest, to recharge, to recuperate, so that 2024 is our best year yet. I would posit that almost every business on the planet could think more strategically about how they treat their people as it relates to time off. We don't need to be accessible 24/7, 365. That is a fallacy that as humans we have adopted, that is not at all necessary unless you are working in very, very specific industries. Firefighters, law enforcement, emergency room doctors, right? Unless you are in these very, very specific types of jobs or industries. But the majority of people listening here, not required. Definitely not required.
Couldn't agree more. We are reaching out the end of the episode. I'm looking at the time here, and I want to kind of keep you here longer than needed. But we are a fintech podcast, and while we have covered the financial services part to a certain extent, we do have to cover the tech part. And the one thing I wanted to kind of round off the conversation here with is, because we touched a lot about relationships. How do you kind of create, it's basically humans, and how do you maintain and make sure that the this overall life cycle of this relationship is sustainable in all the good ways. But one of the things that people talk about a lot these days, we do, of course, here on the podcast as well, is the effect of automation, emerging technologies, generative AI in general. So how do you feel? What are your thoughts around how is the new technologies, the kind of non-human actors in the working life, how are they going to affect all of these relationships and customer retention and employee retention questions?
I think they're going to dramatically affect them, and they already are. Most humans, when interacting with technology, are feeling that the technology increasingly has the opportunity to be either very personalized or not at all personalized. Let's look at two examples. The example I might have with my bank and the example I might have with Netflix. When I log on to Netflix, it says, "Welcome back, Joey." It says, "Last time you were watching this show, would you like to watch the next episode of this show?" It also says, "Other people that watched this show liked this other show that you might have never heard of, but we think you'll like it because we know other people that like the show you were watching will like it. Oh, and by the way, here's a lot of other pictures of shows that are little trailers and teasers to get you excited. Oh, and here's a really easy to navigate search." And I can hand a remote control for our TV to my 8-year-old, and he can navigate through Netflix without any difficulty. I could hand it to a 5-year-old and they could navigate through. Now, juxtapose that experience with my bank. When I log on, is it really you, Joey? We're not sure. Triple authentication. Okay, I go through all the authentication. Okay, now it's you. What do you want? I don't know what I want. I need to look through and see what are my options. Or the only reason I ever log in is to make a transfer. Why isn't that the first option? Why do I have to dig down 5 screens to get to transfer when you know that I log in for transfers? That's what I log in for. When I do get through to the transfer, oh, we're going to send the transfer, but it's going to be 5 days. Well, why is it going to be 5 days? Well, we need to make sure that you have the money. No, you have my money. I don't have my money. You have my money. I'm making the trail. Well, we need to make sure that other people have the money. Well, why do they need to have money? I'm giving them money. Well, we need to make sure it's the right account. Why does that take 5 days? Is someone calling up and saying, "Hey, by the way, do they actually have, does Paul actually have an account at this bank?" No, this is all ones and zeros. This is all happening in an instant. The reality is the bank wants to make the money of holding that, getting it out of my account immediately, holding it in overnight interest-bearing accounts for 5 days before dropping it into the recipient's account. Make no mistake about it, that's why it takes 5 days. This type of behavior is why many of the fintech companies that are online, as opposed to bricks and mortar, the newer fintech companies, are eating the lunch of all those other companies, because they are making, Venmo. I transfer money, and I'm picking some that I have personal experience with. But like, if I Venmo money to my little brother at Christmas, like I did, we went out for dinner and he paid, and so I Venmo him some money, it shows up in his account instantly. He sees it as quickly as I press send. He sees that he has access to the funds. Why aren't big banks doing that? Well, because the big banks, as a general rule, don't have their customers' interest in mind.
I could add a little bit extra.
That's a fair point.
To that, Villa, right? Which is, I also think part of the reason why it takes so long is because whilst there is a half-broken digital lipstick that you're dealing with called a banking mobile app, everything that's happening in the back end is still partially manual. So you still need the old lady to, get the form and print it out and move the data from one place to another. And that adds an extra couple of hours, days, to that transfer that Venmo can do instantly because they don't have that legacy.
And that very well may be true, Paul. And I certainly don't want to be disrespectful to the folks who are doing the hard work to make it happen. What I am saying is in 2024, if you are not thinking about the experience that your customers have in terms of how seamless it is, how fast it is, how intuitive it is, and how easy it is just a matter of time before you are not in business anymore. And this applies to customers, and it also applies to employees. If you're not thinking about how seamless it is to be an employee, how exciting it is to be an employee, how fulfilling it is to be an employee, you will not have that employee for much longer.
So what we can do here is we can conclude that maybe emerging technologies are not a threat to the employees and the customer relationships, but they can augment these experiences in all the directions in good ways to make everything better. I guess that's maybe a positive note to end the conversation on.
I would think so. And I'll close by saying this, if I may, Villa. I think there is a huge opportunity to have automation be a positive thing. Automation lots of times gets seen as a negative thing. Automation should allow us to automate the task that no one wants to focus on, to give us more time to personalize the interactions that people want to focus on. I don't need a personal connection when I'm making a transfer. Where I do need a personal connection is when the transfer was supposed to go through and it doesn't. That's where I need the person to come with empathy and say, I'm so sorry, this should have happened. Let's work together to figure it out. That's when I need the human, not the AI or the chat bot or the, autoresponder of, thank you for submitting your inquiry. We'll be back to you within 72 hours with an answer. What? This is more timely than that. Can we work together? So I do think there is an opportunity to use technology and automation to enhance the level of personal connection we have as customers and as employees as well.
Exactly. I think that's a very good note to end it on. And as we say in our podcast, time flies when you're having fun, and I've definitely had a lot of fun in this conversation. I never thought that we were going to take these paths in these discussions when we started off, but this is all part of the fun that we're having here. But let the audience know what's next for you, Joe. I mean, we already established that I guess you need to write a relationship book next, but beyond that, what's up next?
I continue to explore the overlapping areas of experience as it relates to customer experience and employee experience. So I love giving speeches and doing consulting engagements and being out working to actually apply these principles in the real world. I'm one of those folks I'm not an academic, I'm not a theorist, I'm a practitioner, and I like to bring case studies from the real world and apply them in different industries and do that type of thing. The last thing I'll say, something that I'm going to be exploring a lot in 2024, personally and professionally, is the confluence of empathy in all of these conversations. I think we are, as a species, becoming less empathetic. We are becoming quicker to judge, quicker to accuse, quicker to presume. And I don't think any of those positions are going to help us long term. I think we need to, as humans, develop our ability to spot nuance, develop our abilities to have a deeper understanding as opposed to a cursory understanding, which of course things like social media are pushing us to just the headline understanding. We need to read the paragraphs underneath the headline and be critical thinkers and explore that a little more. But I do think there's an opportunity for an increase in empathy and not being so quick to presume that we understand every aspect of the business, and instead say, okay, how can I be a little more empathetic to this interaction I'm having?
I love that. Excellent. And how can people find out more and follow your future work, Joey?
Well, my books are called Never Lose a Customer Again and Never Lose an Employee Again. They're available wherever you like to get books in all the formats you like. So we have hardcover versions, we have digital ebook versions, and if you've liked the sound of my voice on the audiobook, we have audiobook or the sound of my voice on the podcast. We have audiobooks where you can listen to me read you the book. The best place to find me is on my website, joeycoleman.com. That's Joey, like a baby kangaroo, Coleman, Coleman, joeycoleman.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And I just wish everybody who's listening, number one, thanks so much for joining us. And number two, if we can be of support in any way as you think about your customer experiences or your employee experiences, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you so much, Joey. Thank you, Paul. And thank you to our listeners for listening into another episode. And as usual, please subscribe, like, leave a comment, leave a review. That helps us. That helps everybody to find these fantastic discussions that we're having here. And it helps us forward in developing this podcast. With that being said, thank you for listening. This has been Fintech Daydreaming.
This is Fintech Daydreaming.